Hi, I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the difference between having a tradition and not having a tradition in relationship to some of the earth healing work that many of us have felt called to do. While some of us are fortunate enough to have contact with traditions, some of us are even initiated into them. Many of us are trying to recover the traditions of our ancestors, and we don't have access to traditional teachers, or we're just trying to spend a lot of time recovering our own traditions. So I want to talk a little bit about what it means when someone from a traditional culture or who has studied with a traditional culture tells you that what you're doing isn't shamanism or isn't what a medicine person might do in their tradition. It just means that what you're doing doesn't line up with what they're doing or what they were taught. And that's an important thing because many times they're trying to protect a tradition and make sure that that people understand clearly what goes on in that tradition and don't misunderstand it. So that's one type of thing, and I talk about this a little more in the video I did about working inside or outside of a tradition. But for the rest of us, those who are trying to reclaim the traditions of our ancestors, what we're really concerned with is safety, learning to do things the right way, and not trying to do something that's too advanced, and recognizing when we really are called to do something. So sometimes people who don't work within a tradition get sort of bashed as being sort of new age. Sometimes there's some truth to this. There's a lot of strange information going on out on the internet. But sometimes people are also working really hard and very sincerely to reclaim their ancestral traditions, or they're trying to understand a path that they've been honored to be part of. And so when that happens, I think, especially if you're trying to recover your ancestral traditions and there isn't a lot of information, I think it's helpful to think about this in terms of the way folk magic practitioners might think about this. And the reason I bring up folk magic is because folk magic practitioners work in cultures that have often lost part of their animistic cosmology, but they still have some of it. And what this means is they have deities, nature offerings that they do. They have sort of like a Taoist people in China have some of this. But they're not what you would call like a shamanic or a truly, like a animistic culture like the way maybe native people are or Amazon people are. They're sort of like in between. And so with these traditions often, sometimes people are born into the tradition, and that's how people know that they are sort of selected to do this. But other times it's just basically a path where it's open to many different people, and people sort of learn what they can learn, and they get to whatever level they can work at, and they just work from that level. So that there's something that you can do at almost every level to help create change, including, work on healing the environment from a spiritual level as well as on a practical level. So I think for those of us who are working outside of a tradition, I think that that's a good inspiration for us, and maybe a good model for us is to, instead of worrying about whether what we're doing is exactly like the way people do things in a traditional culture, to just basically pay attention to whatever cosmology we have left, whatever practices we have left in terms of working with ancestors, spirits of the land, offerings, things like that, and to basically try to create whatever safety we can create, learn the best way we can. But at this point, because the other piece of shamanistic cultures or animistic cultures is that everyone in the culture participates in some part of the ceremonial life. And that means their medicine is included as well. I think it's important for large numbers of us to be involved in this. I think eventually we will figure out what roles people are supposed to play within our societies and how to determine what those roles are. But I think in terms of Western cultures, we're just too far removed from having a vibrant and well-defined animistic cosmology to completely be able to work out who's supposed to do what based on, what symptoms they have, or, what teacher they ran into, or, I think it's just there's too much of that that's undone at this point. And I guess the other part of this I've come to believe is that it's the power of many people working together that creates the fuel for the ancestral helping spirits to really start to work miracles through us. And I think even in shamanic cultures it works this way. It's just that there are very gifted individuals who look like they're the ones who are channeling the power. And they are, in a way. But that power is fed by everyone within the community playing their part as well. I've come to really believe this. I mean, I don't know if this is 100% true of every shamanic culture, but I'm certain in animistic cultures it's true, based on the experiences I've had learning from and about the Maya or the Q'ero or even native peoples in the Americas. That, shamanism and certainly animistic traditions are a collective activity. So I think right now the best thing we can do is feel free to participate in earth healing. Trust your spirits and be willing to learn from the results. If we overdo it and people come back and say, you're overdoing it, then with humility we'll learn from this. If we're underdoing it, we'll do that also. But I think it's more important for large numbers of people to participate right now at this phase of our development as an animistic culture than to compare ourselves to already highly developed cultures who have worked out these roles and who are trying to protect their traditions. So I hope this is somewhat helpful, and I'm curious to hear what you think of this.